So we're getting stuck in the world of Talisman here, looking at some starting tactics, looking at a couple of things to take in mind with this, well, with the Fantasy Quest game. And before we look at characters and some of the strategies for your race to the Crown of Command based on the expansions, I want to talk about spells, because this is something that is critical to your strategy in the game. Now, over that, kind of the meta of the game is the random. We're dealing with a D6 on there. There's some slight modifiers, +1, +2, +3, for items, for strength, and for craft. It'll give you a bonus. We've got some fate to control things, but the core of your success or failure or what you can and can't do is for the most part a D6. There are a couple of interrupts, meaning if you have the magic carpet or if you have some sort of teleportation, if you roll a D6, then you could go anywhere on the board, or if you have the riding horse, or a couple of other items that let you roll 2d6 on there. But essentially, for the most part of the game, you're confined to this d6. You want to control the random when it's your turn, and when it's your opponent's turn, the other players, when it's time, you want to interject the random. The number one way to do that is through spells on there. And this idea behind a fantasy game, the characters, the personality, they're kind of classes in themselves. You've got ones that are fighters, tanks. You've got wizards and mages. You've got ones that have certain abilities in there. The traditional fantasy stuff. But even as a fighter, even as the troll, even as the minotaur, even as the ogre chieftain, classes of characters that are primarily strength-based and utilizing that, you want access to spells. You need that. If you're the wizard, if you're the sage, if you're the warlock, of course, you're going to start with some spells. You're going to have the ability to generate spells after you cast them. You're already ahead in that department. That's just the way the game is. If you draw the troll, okay, you've got a good starting life, you've got good starting strength, but you're going to have to work up your craft or know in theory where some of the objects might spawn to allow you to have spells. You do want to be that troll that can cast spells on there. You want to gain access to it as best as you can. Now, the interesting thing about Talisman is that there is a starting game, a mid-game, and then a run for the Crown of Command. And as you progress in craft and strength and life, as you progress in followers and items and deal with events, it's going to move you into those tiers, controlling the random where okay, at this point, based on where I am in the game, in theory, I should stand a decent chance of making the run for the Crown of Command on there. Where it gets interrupted is when it's a race. Other players are moving along, and if they have a couple of really good turns, they get some good items, they get to go a couple of times, maybe you get paused, delayed, immobilized, you miss a turn, and now you were setting up for your run for the crown, but now someone's right behind you. So there are times in the game when you are not ready yet, but you got to make that run anyway, because it's that race. But in the meantime, as you're moving through the beginning of the game, the mid-game, and the end game, you're developing your primary attribute, strength or craft. You're developing followers to boost you, but also to sacrifice in certain areas. You're developing your spell ability. You're developing all of these categories. And all of the characters have the potential to develop all of these. They're just at different points. So with the spells, it starts to... A lot depends on the expansions and what you are playing on there. For the most part, the games that I play with Talisman, they're at the two exact extremes. If it's a new group, or if we have a limited amount of time, we do core only with Reaper, Sacred Pool in there. This way we get a couple of more characters, we get a couple of more cards in there, and we can utilize and make it through that game. If we have unlimited time, or I would say 90% of my games, or 99% of the games that I play, we're all in. We've got the small box expansions. We've got the 4 different realms. Maybe we do dragon. Maybe we don't. But even if we don't do dragon, then the cards are all in there. The character classes are all in there. It's a big game. You've got a lot to chew through, and you've got a lot to explore. What relates with your spells is how easy is it going to be to control the random or influence it. In the base game, the spells, the deck of spells is literally the smallest it's going to be. So within there are spells that are minor annoyances, lose all your gold, immobilization. There are some things like Psionic Blast, where it's going to boost your strength or attack. There's a few like destroy objects or destroy magics. And then there's a couple which we really want to churn through, we really want to get, something like literally random. It's got the die on there, you throw it, you might get totified, they might get totified. Crazy stuff is going to happen in there, especially if you can time it where they burn through their fate and they have to live with that aspect of it. So you are trying to acquire and bank one of those random spells, or one of those spells, if you can destroy object, blast out their talisman when they're moving in to the portal of power, pass there, things in that moment to delay them and really mess them up. How soon you can get those and how potent they are depends on the expansions. I mean, the spell deck with all the expansions is literally so tall. We shuffle it up and we put one half on one side of the table, one half on the other side of the table. And depending on where you sit, that's where you draw from, because literally it's like a card tower of cards that's going to fall on there. So the more the expansions there are, that doesn't lessen magic. It just makes it a little less potent, because the dilution of the cards for the ones that you really want might get lucky, but for the most part, they're in there. That doesn't mean you're not going to pursue the magic path. It's just more expansions. I want to switch more towards followers and items, strength and craft, and leveling up in life. I want that to be a little bit more of a priority, or a little bit more of the random that I'm going to try and control. Less expansions, magic becomes much, much more powerful and potent. But either way, you're the troll or the ogre chieftain, and I just had a fantastic run with the Minotaur. You need to bank those spells. You need to develop yourself to get access to at least one spell so you have that ready to go.